So I think we can start, right? So recording, yes. So before starting, as usual, some announcements. Okay, I already wrote to you on the Telegram, and that's about the labs. Okay, so for this week, nothing changes. I mean, tomorrow there will be the lab for group number 2. So as usual, at 4 p.m. in room 9I. Okay, but from next week we will have well, next week is a bit special for the labs, but I mean we will have labs on the same day on Tuesday. Okay, so this is reflected also here on the general schedule. So we will not use Friday anymore. So basically I got the confirmation and all the allocation of the rooms from the Politecnico administration, and we moved the lab to Tuesday. Okay, so we have a lab from 2:30 to 4 p.m. That's in room R3B. Okay, but just for next week, I mean, so just next Tuesday, it will be in another room, 29B, because there is an event in the room R. Okay, the orienteering event, I don't know how to call it, I mean, for new students and well, actually also for students for the graduate courses and so on. So basically we will have from now until the end of the course just 2 groups for the lab. Okay, the attendance is around probably 60, 70 students in total. So, I mean, we can easily split in 2 groups, and I hope this schedule is also more convenient for you. I mean, the only thing we didn't get is the same room for both groups. So, I'm sorry. I mean, if somebody wants to come and stay a bit longer, it has to move from one room to the other one. Anyway, the schedule will always be updated according to the rooms and dates and so on. So, I mean, just refer to the general schedule of the course for where we will meet and what are we going to do. So I remind you that next week, so Monday 31st, we will have lab in the room, and here we already have a room, 29B. That's a usual room. I mean, the only thing that changes is what we are going to do. Okay, so when I finish this lecture, or well, actually maybe tomorrow, so we wait for the others to do lab number 4. I will publish lab number 5 and 6. Okay, so that's easier, and we will do, I mean, 2 labs in a row, Monday and Tuesday. So let's say we catch up with a new topic that is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that we are going to see today. Okay, so that's the announcement I had. Okay, and then you know, I will not put Friday here in the schedule anymore. Just, I mean, just on Friday the 4th, just to remind you that, I mean, Friday is not there and will not be there anymore. Okay? Okay, fine. So if everything is clear, you don't have any questions, we can start talking about today's topic, which is actually how to use JavaScript inside the browser. On Monday, we saw how to describe the structure of the page and how to deal with presentation issues that were basically the CSS rules that regards both how to present the information and how to lay out the elements inside the page. Okay, and today we add one more thing, one more block, building block, that is JavaScript. Okay, of course we learned JavaScript, and that's why we are going to talk about JavaScript and how to use it in the browser. So that's just a list. And how do you load JavaScript in the browser? Well, actually, we already saw it on Monday, because we said, well, to load Bootstrap, you remember the CSS framework, you also need to load a little bit of JavaScript. And I just gave you the, you know, what to write, the tag and so on. And today we are going to speak more about this. So there's a script tag that we saw last time as well. And basically this script tag allows to include the code inside an HTML document. okay? And this code has to be written in JavaScript. Basically, nowadays, all browsers supports JavaScript and only JavaScript. That's the only language that is supported directly inside the browser, okay? Of course, you could write code directly between the tags as if it were text, you know, in another tag, but that's not much convenient, right? So it's better that we create a separate resource, so a separate JavaScript file containing the code, and then we just import the file and the program inside the web browser in the page. And that's the way in which you do it. So the tag, it will be empty, so no text, and there is a special attribute, src, so the source of the code, that is a URL, and in the simplest case, just a relative URL, so it means take it from the same directory, and that's the name of the resource. So in this case, in our very simple cases today, it will be just a file, okay? And later it can be something loaded from the web server and so on, okay? Okay, fine, so it's pretty easy to understand. That's a tag, an attribute, and the name of the resource that contains the code. Where do we put it? So that's a question, right? Actually, there are different places where we can put the script tag. You remember that the HTML document has two sections, the head section and the body section, okay? And these are two places where you can put the tag. I mean, inside the head section, any place is fine. Head is just metadata information, so I mean, you can put it in any place. Or in the body, again, in the body as well, you can put it at any place, but you know, typically you put it at the end, because if the JavaScript has to manipulate some parts of the page, it gets loaded later, and that's easier, you know, to write the code, because you expect things are already in place when you load the program, when you load the JavaScript, okay? And both solutions have advantages and disadvantages, and in addition we will see other solutions in a minute, okay? So the head section is very clean. I mean, it's metadata information, in fact. I mean, the body is just a description of the content of the page. But what's the problem? The problem is that, well, first, HTML processing is stopped until the script is loaded and executed. So it means I encounter the script, I need to wait for the resource to load, especially when it comes from a web server. So everything is blocked. I load the code, I run the code, okay? And so I run the code before I have the body. So, I mean, if I want to do something on the body, that's really inconvenient, right? I should have some mechanism that says, well, the body has been loaded, so now you can run the code. Or another option is to put it in, to put the script tag in the body of the document. And basically that's what has been done until a few years ago. And as I told you, the best place is the end of the body, because you already parsed all the HTML content. I mean, the browser already parsed the HTML content. So that's a comparison of what's happening. So in short, if you put the tag at the beginning in the head, you basically make everything wait, okay, including HTML parsing, okay, so interpreting the content of the page. And if you put it at the end, basically that's, let's say, the best solution if you have no other alternatives, okay? And that's why last time when we loaded the Bootstrap JavaScript part, we put it at the end of the page, right? You remember that code? Let me show the code. I think we, yeah, it was here, page 3. You remember we had this tag script that is at the end of the body, okay? That was not just a chance, okay? Okay, is there anything better we can do? Well, actually, yes. In modern browsers, there are other attributes we can specify for script, so that we can first decide not to wait. The browser has the possibility, to continue parsing the HTML while it's also loading the code. And so the script is fetched in parallel, but it starts to be evaluated as soon as it is available. Okay, so not really again the best solution, because I'm not sure I finished interpreting all the HTML code. Okay, and so the preferred solution will be to use this defer attribute that still works in parallel for loading the content, but the script is executed automatically after the document has been parsed. Okay, and both this syntaxes must be used in the head of the document, so it's also very clean from the point of view of the how to write the HTML, because it's actually, code is metadata information. It's not a content that has to be shown and put into some places into the browser window. Okay, so the long story and the summary is just load scripts with defer in the head of the document, and that's the situation, the best situation we can have. Okay, so loading is in parallel to HTML parsing, but the execution is always at the end. Okay, so in the best possible place for us, for our purposes. I remember our purposes. In general, the purpose of writing JavaScript code is to make the page interactive and modify the content of the page and so on. And so, in short, we would like the page to be already loaded and ready to be used. Okay, and so the structure of the HTML has to be already interpreted by the browser. Okay. And since we are talking about security quite often in this course, again, I already told you last time, we are loading CSS inside our document. We are loading JavaScript. Again, here we are loading JavaScript as well. You need to be careful, because everything you load from whatever source you might think, it goes inside the page, and it can act exactly with the same permissions as the script that you write directly or you serve from your browser. So you write some JavaScript yourself for your website. It's fine, you put it on your website, so it's sort of trusted, okay, because it's served by a source that you control. But then maybe you want to use JavaScript that comes from other sources, like the other lecture, the Bootstrap JavaScript, or some other packages. Like you see here, this Day.js. All the packages and libraries that we used in Node, at a certain time, maybe we would like to use them in the browser, like these utility libraries, handling dates and so on. And we need to be careful, because what happens if at this URL there is some malicious JavaScript code? I checked once, hopefully, okay, at least the first time I checked, everything is fine, I'm satisfied with the code and so on. How can I make sure that what I'm expecting the user to load every time is always the same code? Well, the solution today is basically have a sort of an actual integrity check. So there's an hash, so a value that is unique and that corresponds to a certain set of bytes that is what is loaded here with this URL. And if even a single byte is changed, the hash changes quite a lot. So the browser can check if the hash matches what has been loaded here from this external resource. If everything matches, I'm guaranteed that if I computed the hash on the code that I expect, the code is basically the same. It's actually the same. It's very difficult to have something else that has the same hash. Actually, practically impossible from the point of view of actual usage. By the way, how do you compute this integrity value? Because you have the code on your computer. You check the code, everything is fine, and I cannot just move the problem to trust somebody else that computes the hash, right? I need to compute it myself, right? And that's a possible way of computing it. There are resources that tells you how to do. I mean, just have a look at in different systems you can do the same thing. And for instance, in Linux, that is what we recommend for this course. I mean, just a matter of using a program that has this hash implemented in a way that the browser can understand. Okay, so basically we're relying on this program that is basically does a lot of things, but basically can compute a lot of different type of hashes. And this is a hash on 384 bits and so on. It has to be encoded in a certain format and so on. It's quite easy to compute it. Okay, just copy and paste this line. Of course, here again, we are moving the issue of trusting the hash to trust this program. Okay, I mean, there is always something that moves around when you need to trust elements in your system. But at a certain point, either you check it yourself, or I mean, you need to trust something. I mean, maybe you didn't check personally the code, but somebody else has checked it. Okay, somebody that you trust, of course. Again, okay, so we load the scripts with the fare. It's fine, and remember to put the integrity check, and don't forget the cross-origin anonymous, as we said the last time, because for a number of reasons that we will see later in the course, without the cross-origin or anonymous, the browser doesn't check the hash, so the integrity value. And at this point, you are free to use any resource that you find in the internet that is convenient for you, like resources served from CDNs and so on, that helps you typically to load your website faster, okay, because they are fast servers, good bandwidth, and you don't spend your bandwidth in serving the same content and so on. Okay, so that's how to load the JavaScript code in the browser. One point is solved. Okay, and then what are we going to do with this code? Okay, first, where does it run? How does it run? And so on. So at this point, we need to understand how the browser manages the scripts. Okay, well, browser always run the code in a sandbox. What's a sandbox? It's a protected environment. It's an environment where the script can be run and it cannot do a dangerous operation for the rest of your system. And remember, the browser is a program running on your device, your computer, laptop, the mobile phone, and so on. So basically, any program that is running locally can have access to a lot of information, like your files and so on, depending on the permission, etc. But in general, it can access your file system, can access your screen, your webcam, the microphone, etc. A lot of things. Okay, and running the program in a sandbox, it means that a certain operation will not be performed because, for instance, no APIs, no primitives actually, APIs is for web, no primitives or no functions are provided in the environment for doing potentially problematic operations like reading files and stuff like that, accessing screen, etc. And so this is a first security, let's say, box that is put outside, around, I mean, the JavaScript program. But of course, to make the program useful, we need to allow the program to do something, right? So we need to expose some functions that can, modify and interact with the browser. Okay, and so basically the program is attached to this global context that basically means the window object. JavaScript has objects. Objects are just a set of property values, can be any type, other objects, arrays, numbers, and strings, etc. And basically through this window object, the JavaScript program can access any element that is supposed to access in the browser. Okay, like elements in the user interface, so in the HTML, in the CSS, etc., etc. And there is also some access to some standard functions in the library. Okay, like you can access the typical object that we saw in the beginning of the course, like object, array, and strings, and big int or date, and so on. Okay, the predefined objects inside the JavaScript environment. Okay, those are all available inside the browser. And then, in addition, you can access other elements that we will describe in a few minutes. So the browser objects and the document objects to interact with the browser and with the document, the HTML document that has been loaded by the browser. Okay. One more thing you need to know is that you can have the tag script multiple times. So we just saw an example with one script, but you can load multiple scripts. Like I load the day.js, and then I load the bootstrap script, and then I load my script as well. What happens when you load multiple programs in the same page? Okay. Well, actually, they are all loaded, and they access. All the programs access the same global scope. So basically, it's like there are shared global variables between these programs. Okay, at least in the really basic configuration. To have something that is more structured, so what we are used to do typically in programs when we have multiple source files that need to interact, is having a more controlled way of interaction without global variables, because you decide the name of the global variable and then everybody has to comply with that. But I mean, if you don't write the code and you take a library and another one and both use the same global name, what are you going to do? I mean, you cannot use them, right? And so we will need some other more structured mechanism, and we will see modules I think already at the end of next week. No, maybe the week after. Okay, so there is a mechanism to handle this situation. But I mean, really basic programs just share the same global space for variables. Okay, including accessing the global variables made available by the browser. So this window object with all these children elements. Okay. Okay, and also, you remember that when we talked about Node.js and asynchronous operations and so on? Well, that's the same. There is the same model also inside the browser. Actually, the browser is the place where asynchronous events happen, because everything you do with the window of the browser is asynchronous. You do it as a user, you click, you move something, you would like to load information from a server and so on. I mean, the start of these operations is asynchronous by definition, because the browser and the program doesn't know when it will happen, right? So there will be asynchronous events that the browser can handle, can recognize, like the click, like the movement, and so on, and they will be passed in some ways to JavaScript. We need to understand how, and today we're going to see exactly how. Okay. They will also trigger potentially predefined behaviors. If there is a link, you click on a link, you don't have to use JavaScript to say the browser, well, load a new page. Okay. That's the default behavior of clicking on a link. That's the usual behavior that all browsers implemented from the start of their existence. Okay, and we can change these behaviors with JavaScript, because if we are able to intercept the event and attach some code, JavaScript will allow you to customize the behavior that the browser performs when you make the a synchronous event happen. Okay, some events can be simply ignored. Okay, if I click in some places which is, let's say, not active, so I mean the background of the page, typically the browser simply ignores the event. Okay, like when you tap on the mobile phone on some places that has no, let's say, no effect in the application. Okay, you remember that JavaScript is single-threaded, and this is true in the browser as well. Okay, and so how can we handle the code that we would like to execute when asynchronous events happen? Well, the mechanism is exactly the same as we saw in Node. Actually, Node, let's say, took it from the browser. So there is a callback queue or message queue or task queue. It takes different names, but the point is always the same. There is an event loop. It waits for something to be executed, and when it's available, it executes the code. Okay? So this is exactly the same figure that we saw a few lectures ago. We saw it in Node, and actually that's exactly the same in the browser. Okay? So there is a callback queue, and there are functions queued here. So code to be executed, and when it's nothing that is that needs to be executed here in JavaScript inside the window of the browser, so in this protected sandboxed environment, the event loop will look for the first function to be executed. If there's nothing is executed. But if there is something, the first one will be put onto the call stack and executed. And it's there, and it runs until it finishes, until it returns. Okay, and then the event loop will monitor the callback queue and will search if there is something else to execute. Yes. So okay, the first one has finished. Let's put the second one, and so on. And if there is nothing to be done, I mean, it simply does nothing. Okay. So typically, you load a page, a web page. You load the script, so the browser will execute these scripts. At a certain point, this script finishes the execution, and then nothing happens. I mean, the event loop is there monitoring if something happens. I mean, something goes into the callback queue. And when does something go into the callback queue? Well, when some asynchronous event happens, like you click and you generate an asynchronous event, and there is some code attached to that click, already attached to the click, or maybe you finish loading something from the network and you attach some code to this event, finishing loading information from the network, and so on. And so when these things happen, the browser will put these callbacks here in the queue, and then the event loop executes them in order. Okay? And remember that until you finish executing the first callback, you cannot execute the second one. Okay? And that is why we said in the beginning of the course, try to write short code and code that can be executed quickly, because you are blocking the queue if you're writing too much code or you're doing too much operations. Okay? If you need them, well, you need to be careful, because each event, each asynchronous event, in particular user interaction with the browser, generate asynchronous events. If there's nothing to be done, that's fine. But if you would like to execute some code that is attached to the event, it is put here in the queue. And if this code needs to update the interface, until you finish the executing the current code, you cannot execute the new code. And so the interface doesn't update, and everything seems to be blocked. Okay, so it's really, really important to keep things that needs to be executed here in the callback queue as short and as quick as possible. Okay. I think this is more or less the same example that we saw last time. Yeah, actually, that's exactly the same example. But I want to show you, this works in the browser as well. The browser has these APIs, like the timeout, the set timeout, and so on. So what you learned until now from programming in JavaScript, it also works in the browser. Okay? You just cannot perform some operations like file loading and stuff like that. But apart from that, because you are restricted from the security point of view in this sandbox of the browser, the rest works the same. Okay? Okay. So that's the description of the event loop. We already talked about this. So just remember that a function call or event handler, if it handles an event, so it's put in the queue because some asynchronous event happened, is never interrupted. So the event loop will not interrupt the execution of a function. It just waits for the function to finish, and that's why you need to finish quickly. Okay? Avoid writing blocking code there. Okay, so now we can talk a little bit more about the objects that are available in JavaScript in the browser. Okay? Because without these objects, we cannot really do that much. I mean, we would like to change the interface, but how can we do? Which method, which function do I call to change the HTML content and so on? Okay? So, browser object model. Well, actually, window represents a window that contains the document. And you remember that we talked about DOM, document object model, is just a representation of the HTML document inside the browser memory. And this is not just a representation, it is also an interface that allows you to manipulate this representation. Okay, that's what we didn't say last time, because we just wanted to see the nice representation. And the document property of window represents the DOM tree that is currently loaded in the browser window. Okay? And then window has also other properties that are more related to the browser than to the document that is actually loaded now. Okay? Okay. So let's first see the stuff related to the browser, because it's very quick. Okay? So there is a console, browser debug console, so you still have the console log. What's the difference? Well, the difference is that it prints inside the console and not in the terminal. Okay, the console of the browser. You remember where the console of the browser is? Console of the browser is here. Okay? Yeah, they print something. I don't really care, but I mean any Polito, any page you load, okay, there is a console, and if you have scripts that says console log, they will print here for the page. Okay, we will try with our code later. So it's very useful for debugging, in short. Normal users, of course, doesn't even know console exists, right? When you use a website, you don't open the console. You have the document, we already say that. That's a location property. Allows you to read the URL to which the browser is currently pointing at, but it also allows you to write in this location. So you can change the page, you can load something else. Okay? Potentially with JavaScript, you can redirect the page, the browser page, to another location. Okay? We're not going to do this because we said, we work with single page applications. So that's a point that we don't want to, something that we don't want to do. We would like to change the URL, but without loading a new page. That's a different question, and it will be addressed later. And then there are a lot of, the history of the URLs, so the list of past URLs. And that's also why, sometimes you wonder, how can you go back with JavaScript by clicking a button to the previous page and so on? Because, that's a list available to JavaScript, and you just take the previous position in the history, you put it into the location, and you force the browser to go back. Okay, and then there are other elements, other, let's say, properties that represents objects that in turn represent an API of the browser, so functions that can be called to achieve some specific, behaviors like storing information and so on. Okay, we are not going to see these objects. We will just rely on for the last part of the course on cookies, which are automatically handled by the browser without any JavaScript code. In a certain sense, it's better because we don't have to write code, right? And but it's useful to know that you can store some amount of information. I mean, typically not that much. It's not a database, okay? But for pages, sometimes you need to store some temporary information and so on. And there are elements that allows you to do that. And so that's more or less what you need to know about the browser object model. So it's very simple, just a few properties in short. Okay. And the interesting part comes with the document object model. That we already said, well, that's okay. That's a reference, but that we deem good. I mean, but the document object model is a browser internal representation of a web page. And in the beginning, it's obtained by parsing the HTML that we load either from a file, as in very simple examples that we do today, or more usually, like I just did before, from a web server, like the Politecnico web server, whatever web server. It gives you an HTML, and the browser transforms it into a tree. Okay. But the important thing for today, for the DOM, is that the browser also exposes an API that allows you to interact with the DOM, okay? Using JavaScript, of course, not directly. So it allows you to access a lot of headers, metadata, structure, change the properties, attributes of the nodes, change the structure of the tree, remove elements, create elements, attach elements to some positions in the tree, manipulate the CSS that applies to elements, and so on. So basically everything you can think, you can do it with the DOM. With DOM methods that manipulate the DOM itself. Okay. And last but not least, you can also attach or remove event listeners, and this is really important. If you want to make an application interactive, you would like to listen for events, clicks, movements, input, text input from the user, and so on. Okay, these are all events that are managed by the browser and to which we can attach JavaScript code. Okay, using what? Functions provided by the DOM. Okay, and attach them to specific elements or part of the tree of the DOM. Okay, good. So we now go deeper into more details about this. Okay, so there is a sort of hierarchy of elements in the JavaScript code that we can write. We say that, JavaScript is not object-oriented, so speaking about hierarchies is a bit weird. But it allows you to, let's say, understand the logic behind the functions that are provided by the DOM. Okay, and so the basic element is the node, a node in the tree that can be of different type. It can be a text or it can be an element, a comment. Okay, we don't care about the comments now. An element. And it means an element that can be an HTML element. Typically, in our case, until now, we just saw HTML elements. There are other elements like SVG, for drawing and so on, but we don't really care about this now. HTML elements can be of different type, depending on the tag. Okay, so basically, interactive elements like input elements will have a set of properties and methods that other elements will not have, and so on. Okay, so the last line, of course, is the more specific one. Okay, but in short, we think of the nodes as HTML elements, and we will see that all HTML elements in the DOM will have a set of methods, quite a lot of methods, that we can use to manipulate them. Okay. Okay. So most of the DOM APIs, means functions provided by the DOM, may manipulate set or lists of nodes. Okay. So we have this node list type. I mean, it's not really a type because, you know, in JavaScript type do not exist. It's basically an object that is made available by the environment. And it's more or less like the array object of JavaScript, okay? Because it supports quite a lot of methods of the JavaScript array. It has a length property. You can use you know, entries, keys, values for each, and so on, functional programming methods and stuff like that. And in short, it's just an array that has been made a bit more specific because each element has a set of predefined methods available. Okay, and so we just think in terms of nodes and node lists when we deal with elements inside the DOM tree. Okay. Let's come to the manipulation. So let's see a few of these methods. These are the most important methods that you can use to obtain access to specific elements in the DOM. You know that a tree can be quite complex. We saw a quite complex tree before in the example, right? You see, I mean, this is not really a difficult document. It's probably, you know, just head, body, a div. There will be, you know, just a few paragraphs. I mean, not really paragraphs, it's just blocks. But I mean, I don't really care. A quite simple document can be. I mean, the tree can really be big. Okay, even for, let's say, normal standard applications, web applications, not so complex. And so how can we manipulate the nodes? First of all, we need to have a reference to the node we are interested in. Okay, and how do we get the reference to the node we are interested in? Like, let's say, the paragraph, the block element that defines a certain area of the screen and so on. Well, these are the methods that are available anywhere in your script because they are methods of document, you see, not of the nodes, of document, that is the global object available from the browser. Okay, document, and there is this get element by ID, and it finds the node, so it means the HTML element where there is an attribute ID equal to a certain value, and the value is the one that you pass as a parameter. Okay, so that's why you should have only one element, one HTML element with a certain value for an ID. Okay, because it's meant to be like a pointer, a unique tag that you put inside your document to access it quite easily from JavaScript, okay, or from other systems. I mean, typically JavaScript code. I mean, we saw the CSS as well. Okay. Get elements by tag name. Okay, that's according to the name of the tag. So get all the divs, get all the tables, get all the whatever input elements and so on. You see the S, I mean, this returns not a node but a node list. So a sort of array of nodes. Okay, and you have more or less the same methods that you have with the JavaScript arrays. Get elements by class name. Since class is so common as an attribute, you have also a specific method for this. Okay. And you also have this query selector all, and they take a selector in CSS syntax. You remember the CSS syntax we saw on Monday? No, you can have the dot something, you can have the hash something, you can have also complex selectors. One tag with the children of another type, immediate children and stuff like that. You know, the selector syntax is quite powerful, and it can be used here in these two methods, query selector and query selector all. Okay? And so basically what you learn in CSS, especially CSS selectors, not rules, okay, can be reused here quite simply, because basically you just pass a string that contains the CSS selector. You would like to have all the, let's say, I mean, all the divs, no, all the, let me see, all the header h1 and h2, you just pass a string h1, comma h2. That is the selector that we saw in CSS to get this information. Okay, good. I mean, one returns the first element and the other all elements in a node list. Okay. So I'm spending a little bit of time here because that's the main way in which you start your JavaScript program inside the browser. If you write JavaScript manually inside the browser, you probably start with one of these functions, because you start by getting a reference to a node and then you start working from there. Okay, from the node you find children, you attach an event, handler, and so on. Okay. Okay, good. Node finding methods, so the previous ones, also work on any element node. Okay, but in this case they only search through descendant elements. So basically, when I identify an element in the tree and I want to search in the subtree, I just use the same methods, but they only search in the subtree. Sometimes you know that there is an element that is in a certain point of the tree. You know that a parent somewhere, you can access it easily with this method. You access the parent and then you search for the element in which you are really searching. Okay, for by calling these functions again on the reference, so the node that you just found before. Okay, it can be convenient sometimes. Okay, so let's see a very simple document. I think we can try this to run this example. Okay, so that's the HTML document. Right, so head, empty head, we don't care. The body, there are three divs with ID, foo, class, bold, color, and then there's a script tag. Of course, we are putting the code here just for simplicity. I mean, this is a really simple example to start, trying JavaScript, right? And we can see what is returned by each single call, just to experiment a little bit. Let me try this example just to show you how to, start, working on this method. I mean, experimenting with these methods. Okay. So I think, yeah, this JS, a new file, test HTML. Just put this stuff and. Oh yeah, let me run this example as it is. So, how do I run an HTML file? Well, actually, I'm not running an HTML file. I'm loading an HTML file. With what? With the browser, right? So, I open the folder. I just say, for convenience, I just say open with the browser. Okay? It doesn't show you anything because, there's nothing to show. But if you go to the inspector, you find the code. We had divs and they were empty. There's nothing to show, right? If we have something inside, of course we can, no. Well, let me change it in code that's, hello. If there is text, of course it will be shown, right? Where is the reload? No, reload. Okay. Okay. But the point is, trying this code. Okay. Actually, this code has no effect because we didn't do anything. We just get handles to nodes, and then we didn't do anything. We didn't even assign to a variable and so on. But why I wanted to try this example? Because, experimenting with this code, with get elements, get selector, and so on, it's easy in the browser console. It's quite easy. So you would like to see how something works. document dot get element by ID, and now I need to look. I mean foo, F-O-O, foo. Okay. Well, actually, no. Sorry, it was a string. Okay, it's a string. Otherwise, we look for the variable foo in JavaScript and it's not being defined. Okay, and that's the element div. Okay, that has a number of methods and so on. All nodes have quite a lot of properties and methods, but you have the handle now. Okay, and this was the div foo where we had the text, right? So let me see if we can see the text. Inner text. Hello. Okay. And it's a property of a JavaScript object that you can go and modify. Okay, just let me try, just to show you the powerfulness of what we just saw. Let me say let d equal to. Okay, so now it's d, and d. Just we will see it in a minute, but inner text equal to Dear Enrico. Okay, you see what happened here? I changed the text. I did it dynamically through code. I mean, I'm just playing with the console because it's more convenient. Okay, otherwise I can write exactly the same code in the document. Okay. So I start with the low, and then I do actually the same, right? I can do inner text Dear Enrico. But in this way, I cannot see the JavaScript execute. See, now I reload the document, so I restart again. Where is the reload? Okay. But you see nothing. You don't see hello, right? And now you also see Dear Enrico because the inspector updates accordingly to what has been done by the code. Okay? So everything is dynamic. So if you want to play, you really need to play in the console. Okay? But this is just for, getting used to how things work. Okay? So this is a very simple example. Okay? Good. So I hope you got how powerful running JavaScript inside the browser can be, because you can directly manipulate and change everything in your document object model. It means in the tree that represents your document. So you can make everything disappear, or you can make new things appear, and so on. Okay. So now we are going to see how to take the most advantage from these methods. Okay. So there are quite a number of methods available. You saw, a big list when I opened the div element before in the console. We will only point out the most important ones that can be useful, might be useful sometimes one day for you, in case you need to write JavaScript directly inside HTML pages. Okay, so node is an element in a tree, so it can have a parent, can have siblings, so like brothers, sisters, okay, children, and so on. So there are quite a number of either properties or methods that allows you to access all the nodes which are connected to the current one. Once you have a reference, you arrive at a certain node, and then you can move around in the tree. Okay, parent node, child nodes, which is an array. There is only one parent. There can be multiple children, of course, and stuff like that. Okay, so just get used to the fact that you need to move around in the tree. There will be probably some property or method that returns what is needed for you. Okay, good. So also you can access attributes of each single HTML tag or element. Okay, and actually they are exposed as object properties of the DOM object, so of the DOM node. Okay, body ID page. And so you will find dot body in document because there is a body, and there is dot ID on that node. Okay, so document body is a node, and input again is a node, and so on. Okay, if we are unsure, just check in the console, in the browser console. Okay, again in the console. Document dot div dot no, div was not, sorry, what was the name? Well, we need to get element by ID foo, and then get element by ID foo, and then here you will have ID, right? The ID is actually foo, right? But you see, it's accessible as a property. You go, you see here in a list, it's a property, okay? If you have another attribute, I don't know, let me see, well, something that makes sense, I don't know. Well, actually, I mean, you can define any properties, any attribute. I mean, div is a quite generic one, so I don't want to make an example that then it leads you into a bad way. I mean, it takes you to a bad place. But let's say you have different types of, different attributes like ID, type, whatever, style, or maybe source for H, for A, that is the anchor element, so the link, and so on. I mean, you can access them. So you can read them. And sometimes you can even set them, okay? So this is just a way in which basically the browser exposes all the DOM to JavaScript in the most flexible way, okay? You can search by ID, you can search with the CSS selectors, you can access elements by the methods, navigate in the tree, you can, or the properties, navigate in the tree, and you can access the value of the attributes through properties of the node and so on, okay? You just need to get used to this system. Okay, and there are convenience methods. We are not going to see all of them because, it's like, like reading the telephone roster, right? So, for attributes, there are methods that can help you, to set, delete, remove, etc., all the attributes and so on. Just think in terms of what we learned. We learned CSS, and sometimes that can be a method that works with CSS selectors, which is quite convenient, or simply there are methods for specific purposes like attributes, manipulating classes, as we will see in a minute, and so on. Okay? One more thing. We didn't say how to create elements. I told you, well, you can even create elements. Actually, you need a method to create an element, okay? And the method is on document. So document, create element, tag, and we can create an element, okay? Like this element, okay? Just try to use it, okay? We try to use it in the console. Okay, so, oops. Okay, console is here. I just did cut and paste from the slides, right? So div, I created a new element, div, okay? Of type div, I put it into the variable name div. Sorry, programmers are like this. You can give any name for the variable, it's just a JavaScript variable, right? But for us, it contains a reference to a node. And then on this node, we can operate. So we can change, we can set the properties as I did before, inner text, class name, and so on, okay? But why it doesn't appear? I just set inner text, right? Well, actually, the node is there. it's just not shown. Why? Because it's not present in the DOM tree. Okay? It's just an element, but it's in the memory of the browser. It's not in the DOM tree that is what is currently shown in the browser window. Okay, so how do we put the element or attach the element in the tree? Well, there's this append child method that works on any node. So we need to find a place where we would like to append the element in the tree. Okay? So you have a tree, you have branches, and you need to decide where to put the things on the branches. Okay? Just for convenience, let's start with the body because it's easier. We don't need to pick up an element, right? Okay. And so just we do body, so document body, okay, append child and div, okay. Without the quotes, this is the variable, this is the reference to the node that is in the memory of the browser, okay. And look what happens here in the window up here, okay. So now it gets inserted into the DOM tree and it will appear. Okay? You see? It appeared here. Okay? Do you want to know where it is in the tree? Well, look in the inspector. Div, script, and div. It was appended at the end of the list of children of body. Okay, body had 4 children, div, and script. And now it has a 5th children, which is again another div. Okay, which contains some text, so it's nice, and we can see something. Otherwise, if we only have empty blocks, we see nothing, right? I mean, it's nice to see in the inspector, but I mean, it's also nice to see something here in the browser window. Okay. So remember, this is a very common mistake. You create stuff, but we are here to help in the lab. I mean, don't worry too much. I mean, you create stuff. Well, I just created a div and a paragraph and stuff, and nothing appears. Well, you forgot to put the element into the DOM tree. If it's not in the DOM tree, it's not rendered by the browser in the window. Okay? Very simple. If you remove something from the DOM tree, it disappears from the window. Okay? So it's very easy. I mean, the DOM tree is what is shown. Very simple. Okay, so there's a lot of methods that can be used to put stuff or remove stuff from the DOM tree. Okay, we just saw the append child, which is probably the simplest one. But you can insert before a certain node, replace a child. You can append, prepend, before, after, replace, but depending on where it's convenient for you. You would like to have a new sibling, you would like to have replace an element and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of methods are available. It's useless that we go inside the description of all these methods. When you are unsure, you search Google, I mean, I don't want to say, but you ask ChatGPT and then, I mean, verify on the manual that, it's something reasonable and it's what you expect and then you use it, okay? It's useless to remember all these methods, okay? Okay, handling tag content. Actually, we already saw the inner text, which is actually the next slide, right? How can we set the text inside the tag? Well, actually, the text is managed in a little different ways compared to nodes. Okay, so it has its own property. It's a text node and it's not a node. Remember the hierarchy here. Okay, the text was here. Okay, so it was outside the inheritance of element. That is the HTML element. Okay. It's outside, so we need to manage it in a bit different way. But not that difficult. I mean, text, it's just text. It's a string. For JavaScript, it's just a string, right? So you just read and write, set and use a variable, a JavaScript variable. And the name of the JavaScript variable is inner text. The point is that, a tag can contain also other HTML tags. So what happens in case this string contains HTML tags? Where we go back one slide, there is another property that is called inner HTML. And you can basically write HTML and insert it as text in a certain point. But actually, the fact that you use inner text says to the browser, inner HTML says to the browser, well, interpret this string as HTML. So if it contains text, it gets transformed into nodes. They are inserted into the DOM tree again, and they are interpreted. If they are scripts, they are executed, and so on. So it's like you wrote JavaScript, you wrote HTML, and you wrote this HTML since the beginning. Okay, since it appears now, it gets parsed and executed simply now and not in the beginning. Okay. The browser will parse the content, convert it into DOM, nodes, attributes, and so on, whatever is needed, and interpret it. So it means if you write script something, it will be interpreted. So it's a script tag, fine. There is JavaScript, it will be executed. Okay? So in a certain sense, it can be dangerous. Indeed, that's in the guidelines, right? Of writing, good web applications. You typically never use this inner HTML because if a malicious string arrives, it's more or less like the SQL injection, right? You need to be really, really careful. You set the string yourself, and that's fine, but what happens in case the string can be manipulated by somebody else? And maybe sometimes it's not so evident that the string can be manipulated by somebody else. Because, of course, it's unintended usage of your code, okay? So, let's give it a try, like a strong hi there. Okay, so what's strong? Strong makes the text more evident. So, in short, it's like bold text, okay? So here we have the div, right? So div inner, So div inner HTML, div inner HTML equal to, okay? So now I'm setting the inner HTML, and there's an HTML tag, strong, okay? So it will be interpreted and shown by the browser. So it goes into the DOM tree. It creates a new node, strong, and it will be shown as strong, which is by default in the browser. I think it comes out as bold text, I hope. Yes, okay. You see? It came out as bold text, but I'm not caring about the bold. This is new HTML stuff, new nodes that have been created automatically by the browser. I didn't have to do create node, append child, and so on, and so on, and so on. Okay? So it's quite powerful, but also quite dangerous. Okay? If you put there something that is not, what you expect. Okay? So if you put a script, I don't want to show it here, but if you put a script with something like alert something, and you execute the code, something pops out. Okay. And if you do something more malicious, of course, it's even worse. Okay, good. To be safe, you can use inner text, but this works only if you only have text, of course. If you would like to set HTML tags, of course, it doesn't work. Okay, but for certain very specific and task where you only need to show the text that is to be shown to the user, actually, that's fine. Okay, let me try this example. Oops. Just to show you the set interval. Okay, so let's create a place where we have an ID time. Okay, so I just modify the previous code. Okay, and I'm just drafting some code, right? So I have this hello, okay, with the div id time. I take the element with id equal to time, and then I set the text according to the current date actually time, and then I need to refresh the content every second, every 1 second. What is missing here? Well, actually, I need to load the day.js library, right? Okay, but we saw before how to load something, right? So just try and you will see that it doesn't work. So I will reload the document, okay? And of course, nothing happens because the day.js library is not available. So day.js is not defined, okay? Text day.js, okay? You can even debug code in the standard browser. Again, this is the standard version of the browser. So how do I import JavaScript? The day.js, sorry. Let me see. There was the example, right? Yes. Okay. Copy. So where do we put script defer? We said in the head, right? That's the best place. Save. Let's try. And then I will commit it so you have it. No, still didn't load it. Why? I mean, I didn't check the resources still existed, maybe. Let me just check. Yeah. And so, what's happening? Day.js is not, yeah. Yeah, that's a point. I mean, doing draft examples. I mean, you know, this gets executed later, right? After script here, because script here is executed when it's encountered, okay? So now it works because div was defined before, but it's not so convenient, right? So to fix this, either we take all the code and we put it into an external file, we load it with the fare, or maybe, you know, in the interest of being, you know, do things more quickly, we just load the script here without the defer. Okay. Okay, now it works. Okay. What I did is just, you know, make sure that what you use in JavaScript is defined before you use it. Okay. That's the only point of this very small example. But you see that now the time is updating automatically. I did a set interval in the code. So basically, there's a callback. That is, you know, take no parameters, but take the time element that has been recovered before by the JavaScript code, the reference, and you set inner text to the value that corresponds to the current time. Okay? That's all. And then it's simply executed automatically by the browser. Every 1 second, there's a callback that is put into the callback queue. There's nothing else that is being executed in the browser window. So the callback is put into the call stack. It's executed. I mean, very simple. It's just an instruction. And, well, actually not really a simple instruction because it calls day.js and then the function format. So, you know, it does all this operation, it returns the string, and the string is set into inner text. And setting it to inner text means displaying it to the user. Okay? So that's what's happening here. Okay? Good. I think I can commit the example so you have it now. Just let me test, right? And then what's the time? Yeah. Well, let me see if we... So creating elements, we saw it. Let me arrive at a good point, and then we have a break. So there's plenty of methods, to modify the HTML, the text, and so on. Again, just use them as they fit your requirements. You can even clone nodes with or without the children, okay? And you can even change the style of the elements because you can operate on the class list quite easily. So on the value of the class attribute, which you remember, that's basically how styling CSS works. And you can even operate on the style attribute. And you can even get the result of applying the style rules in case you need them. Okay, because many different rules may apply to the same element. If you would like to know what is the resulting style, so the one that is being actually applied by the browser, there is even a method for that. So in short, there is probably a method for everything you might need, for when you modify and you interact with the DOM tree in the browser. Okay, that's basically the message of this part of the lecture. Okay, I think we can break here maybe for 10 minutes. So I commit the file of the small example that I did. If you have any questions or comments, they are welcome during the break. And then we will resume talking about events, because it's really important to handle events. Without events, it's really nice programming. We show something in the browser, but we cannot interact with the user. Okay, so we need to understand events. Okay, so let's break for 10 minutes. Thank you.